Shalom, shalom, Israel's brothers, Abba. Y'all are coming back with another cold cut. I like to give our honor and glory and praise to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai. There's going to be a cold cut that's going into how do you prove who the Gentiles are in the New Testament, right? For a lot of the newer brothers, maybe sisters, right? Whoever that wants to kind of, learn how to break down, who the Gentiles are. If there was a Christian that came up and said, the Gentiles in the New Testament, neither Jew nor Greek, and they hold up that that wet pointy finger and pointing in your face, and you don't want to be confounded by that, right? You want to know how to break down who the Gentiles are. This is kind of the way I do it, but I know brothers may have different ways, but this is kind of a short lesson on what you can do, what precepts you can use if you want to go into the Greek, whatever you want to do, right? But first thing that, brothers would do is go to Romans chapter 9 and verse 24, right? We want to get these Christians to agree with you. Let's go to Romans chapter 9. Where we at? Right here, right? Romans chapter 9 and start at verse 23. I'll start at verse 23, all right? And I read it slow, and I says, and that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy, which he had afore prepared unto glory. Even us whom he have called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles. And I'll pause. Is that correct? Yeah, also of the Gentiles. You sure? Yeah, it says it right there. And, they get prideful. You want to kind of feed their ego and their spirit, right? And they, kind of get high-minded. Verse 25. As he also said in OC. Now, who's OC? That's very pivotal, because if you ever wrote an essay, if you ever wrote a paper, and you had to use citations, credible sources, you always refer to a source that supports your claim or your argument. Now, Paul is about to make an argument about the Gentiles, but he is using someone called OC, or which in the Greek is really Hosea. He's using Hosea to cite what he's about to say, meaning Hosea is a supporting source. And it says, I will call them my people, which were not my people, and her beloved, which was not my beloved. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, you are not my people, there shall they be called the children of the living God. Yeah, see, their Gentiles are also going to be called the people of the living God. They're not going to be called the other nations. Well, hold on. We have to see what OC said. We need to see what Hosea said, why Paul is referencing this, because whatever Hosea said, Paul means the same exact thing. That's how you cite a reference. You're not going to cite a reference that disagrees with you. That's not how that works. Let's go to the book of Hosea and let's see where Paul is getting his understanding from. This Hosea 1 and 10. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea. Wait, hold on. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, who are the them, the number of the children of Israel, you are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, you are the sons of the living God. So hold on. Paul just referenced Hosea, and Hosea said the children of Israel. So that means in this context, the Gentiles have to be referring to the children of Israel. That's cut number one, right? You bring them here, they're high-minded, they think the Gentiles is talking about everybody, but they have to answer the question on why is Paul referencing Hosea when Hosea said the number of the children of Israel, when Paul is making that statement about the Gentiles. The Gentiles have to be at the number of the children of Israel. It has to mean that. Now, what you can also do is, if you didn't want to take that route, you like to go into the Greek, you like to go into these different things, which is fine. You just don't want to get caught up in semantics and words, Greek and Hebrew, and then they're taking you to Greek and Hebrew, but you can do this route as well. So now that word for Gentile in Romans 9 and 24, even us whom he have called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles. Now, let's go here. The word for Gentile in the Greek is ethnos.
Strong's G 1484, ethnos. Ethnos.
Right, ethnos or ethnos. When you go here, and it says definition, probably from a race, a tribe. A tribe. Now let's go down. One nation of people. It says heathen, right? But because Gentile also means heathen, right? And it says, outline of biblical usage, a multitude, whether of men or of beasts, associated or living together, right? A multitude or of individuals of the same nature or genus, not different nations, but this is a multitude of people that have the same nature or genus, meaning the same forefather. So Paul is talking to a people that have the same forefather. We'll get into that too. The human family, a tribe, nation, people group. A tribe, nation, people group. So if you want to take this route as well and kind of go into the Greek on the word Gentile, instead of breaking it down, the kind of the longer way going into Hosea, that's fine. You can do that as well. But this, in the Greek, Gentile in Romans 9:24 means a tribe, nation, or people group, or a multitude of individuals of the same nature or genus. The Gentiles are Israelites that are scattered abroad. Now, you just made this claim and you proved it. You have to get multiple witnesses. So we can jump up to Romans chapter 9 and we can get the classic, the ultimate classic for chopping down these Christians. It's Romans chapter 9:21. 9:1. I say the truth in Hamashiach, I lie not. My conscience also bearing me witness in the Holy Spirit that I have great heaviness and continual sorrow in my heart. For I could wish that myself were accursed from Hamashiach for my brethren, my kinsmen according to the flesh, who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the service of God and the promises. So all these things were given to the Israelites. Well, a lot of these Christians like to bring up the adoption because you can adopt the other nations into the covenant or into, graft them in, as they say, that G word, graft them in, right? You can graft them into being Israelites, or you can adopt them. Why is it called adoption? If you're adopting the person that belongs to you, that's what they will say. But they don't understand that person that belongs to us has been far off and scattered off for a multitude of, for years, time, right? But the adoption only pertains to the Israelites. How do we know that? Let's go to Galatians chapter 4 and verse 4. There's another cut too to prove the adoption is only for Israel. Galatians chapter 4 and verse 1. Now I say that the heir, as long as he is a child, differeth nothing from a servant, though he be Lord of all, but is under tutors and governors until the time appointed of the Father. Even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under elements of the world, right? Verse 4, but when the fullness of the time was come, Yahweh sent forth his son, made of a woman made under the law. Talking about Yahweh Shai, Hamashiach. Verse 5, to redeem them that were under the law. Pause. You gotta slow down when you read. Because they're not gonna listen to every detail. Who did Yahweh Shai to come to redeem under the law? Who was under the law? Exactly. It was the Israelites. We might receive the adoption of sons. We might receive the adoption of sons. Now, this is what you can do. When you go into the Greek word for the adoptions in Galatians chapter 4, right? And verse 5, it says, let's go here.
Strong's G 5206. Huathesia. Huathesia.
Huathesia. When you go into the Greek word for adoption, and you show them this, it's hard to get around. Now let's look at the Strong's info. Right? Adoption. Right? Let's go to the show outline of biblical usage. This word's going to kind of get crazy. And it says, number one, the first one, that relationship which Yahweh was pleased to establish between himself and the Israelites in preference to all other nations. Hold on. The adoption means it's only for the Israelites in preference to all other nations that God was pleased to establish with himself and the Israelites. This is not for everybody. This is not for everybody. That definition in Galatians chapter 4 and verse 5, that adoption of sons was only talking about the Israelites in preference between God and the Israelites in preference between all other nations. So that's linking that up with Romans chapter 9 and verse 24, where the scriptures already told you that adoption belongs to Israel. That's clear cut, in plain. Now let's say, well, they try to argue against that. That's fine, because we have 1,000 other scriptures showing that the Greeks or the Jews were Hellenized. Well, hold on. Let's go to Galatians chapter 3 and 28. You like Galatians, right, buddy? That's what they'll say. You like Galatians, buddy, right? All right, this is Galatians 3:28. There's neither Jew nor Greek. There's neither bond nor free. There's neither male nor female, for you are all one in Yahushua Mashiach, right? They'll read this to you, and they'll start jumping up and down, clapping, pointing in your face, yelling. That demon tends to come out. Well, then I'll ask them a question. Are you a Jew? No. Are you a Greek? No. Well, what does that verse have to do with you? Confounded, right? But besides that, we have to show that the Jews, there are certain Jews that were Hellenized. The Hellenization period that happened. We read about the Greeks. We read about the Egyptians. We read about the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persian and the Medes. We read about the Romans. We even read about America. Where do you read about the Greeks if you don't have the Apocrypha? Exactamente. Let's go to the book of 2 Maccabees chapter 6. We have to go to 2 Maccabees 6 to shows the Jews that were Hellenized. All right, 2 Maccabees chapter 6 and verse 1. Not long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers and not to live after the laws of God. That's the first verse. So I would jump down, and brothers would jump down to verse number 4. For the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles who dallied with harlots and had to do with women within the circuit of the holy places, and besides that brought in things that were not lawful. The altar also was filled with profane things which the law forbiddeth. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient fasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. So you couldn't do ancient fasts, Day of Atonements, fasting for your nation, couldn't keep Sabbath days. You could even call yourself a Jew. So if I can't call myself a Jew, and I'm born a Jew by blood in the Grecian Empire, what am I able to call myself? You're going to call yourself a Greek. Why is in Galatians chapter 3 are they speaking about Greeks during the time of Rome? You have to think about that. They don't even think about that, right? It's because the Jews were Hellenized, and Paul knows this. Let's go to the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 1. Moreover, brethren, I would not that you should be ignorant how that, and this is where you got to read very, very closely to these Christians, how that all our fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea. So you can't just say how that all our fathers were under the cloud and passed through the sea. No, our fathers, because Paul is talking to the church of Corinth. You would set this apologetic or Christian up saying, well, hold on. Who's in the church of Corinth? Because if they believe that the Gentiles is everybody, they're going to see it's a multitude of people, a mixture of people. That couldn't be the case. Why? Because why did Paul say our fathers? Paul is indicating that the people he's talking to share the same forefather. And they all passed through the Red Sea. Now it gets a little bit more specific and gets kind of crazy. Now, whose forefathers passed through the Red Sea? The Israelites. Verse 2, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. Well, hold on. When the cloud was over the tabernacle of the congregation, book of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Moses was there, who is Moses ministering to? All you got to do is read the first 5 books, and you're going to see it's the Israelites. It gets more specific. Verse 4, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Hamashiach. Now, hold on. When Moses smote the rock, right, I believe in the book of Numbers, who was that for? Was that for the Edomites? Was that for the Moabites, the Ammonites? the Gershonites, the Amorites, right? The Edomites. Who was that for? That was for the Israelites. So you can also use 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 1 down to verse 4 to show that Paul, when he was speaking to the church of Corinth, they were all Israelites because they share the same forefather as Paul, and went through the same exact dynamics in times past. 1 Corinthians 12 and 1. Now concerning spiritual gifts, you can use this precept as well. Brethren, I would not have you ignorant. You know that you were Gentiles carried away unto these dumb idols, even as you were led. Now hold on. If they say Gentiles, right? A lot of these Christians apologetics, they say Gentiles, that's the other nations. How can I used to be another nation? Because it says you were Gentiles. How can I used to be Chinese? Now I come back to being grafted in as an Israelite. How can I used to be a Greek, a Grecian, an ethnic Grecian, serve Zeus, pale skin, but now I come back, I can be grafted as an Israelite. I can be an Elamite with a dot on my forehead. But you know what? Through Christ, I'm an Israelite. No, that's not how that works. You were Gentiles because these men and women that served diverse gods that were called Greeks, Romans, Americans, Babylonians, they can come back to being an Israelite. So they were Gentiles. And guess what? What made them get Gentiles? By being carried away into dumb idols, even as they were led. That's why through idolatry and through serving the customs of the other nations. Let's go to Psalms 106. It's the book of Psalms. So if you want to know how to break down what the Gentiles are, it's kind of a quick course of precepts and things you can go to prove that. This Psalms chapter 106 and 35. Right? But let's start verse 34. They did not destroy the nations concerning whom the Lord commanded them, talking about the Israelites, but they were mingled among the heathen and learned their works, and they served their idols, which were a snare unto them. Yea, they sacrificed their sons and their daughters unto devils. Now hold on. 1 Corinthians 12 and 1 saying the same thing. But the Israelites, we know the Israelites, they were mingled among the heathen. They were in the midst of the heathen and learned their works and then started serving their idols. This is a precept that you can link up with 1 Corinthians 12 and 1. So if you wanted to know how to break down who the Gentiles are, right? If you want to, you didn't want to get cut on that point, you want to be a little bit more confident, then, all praise to Yahweh Shem Yahshua, Lord willing, this was edifying, this was helpful to those that know young men that want to become teachers, for the women that are teaching the younger women, right? All praise to Yahweh Shem Yahshua. I like to bid of my